Did you know women are more likely than men to develop dry eyes, which may be due to hormonal changes during the menstrual cycle or after menopause, and the use of oral contraceptives? Give your dry, burning, or irritated eyes a daily refresh with Refresh Optive Mega 3 Lubricant Eye Drops, a preservative-free formula that provides fast-acting, lasting relief. Refresh Optive Mega 3 is safe to use as often as needed. Find Refresh online or in the eye drop aisle at all major retailers.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to an extended free preview of this month's episode of What a Cartoon Movie, all about Looney Tunes back in action. I am one of your hosts, Jenna Elfman, stunt double Bob Mackey, and who is here with me today, as always?
Defender of this movie, whether it be rabbit season or duck season, Henry Gilbert.
Yes, it's our live action month, and because of that, we are covering a live action cartoon hybrid, Looney Tunes back in action. Consider it a sequel to many What a Cartoon movies of the past. We've covered Space Jam, Cool World, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I'll give you one clue as to the best version of that, and we already covered it back in April of 2022, I think, but we're covering another in the line of cartoons mixing up with live action people, and this one is fun in spirit, but unfortunately a mega failure. Isn't that right, Henry?
Yes, it is a big flop that messed up the Looney Tunes franchise for years to come afterwards. And shockingly, we talked about this one, I'd say close to as long as we talked about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because it's full of interesting production notes as well as tons of cameos to explain both of actors and cartoons. Plus, we're joined by Looney Tunes expert Thad Komorowski for our history section, just like on Space Jam, to help give us further context for all of the Bugs Bunny history that leads up to this film.
That's right, and what you're about to hear is going to be a brief preview of that very long history of Looney Tunes back in action, but if you want to hear the entire history and our full discussion of the movie, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons and sign up at that $10 level. When you do, you'll unlock the rest of this podcast, and I believe like 6.5 years worth of What a Cartoon Movie podcasts. They're all between 3 to 6 hours long. We've covered so many things. Like I said earlier, we've covered Space Jam, Cool World, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, 3 movies very like this. And we've also covered the entire Disney Renaissance from the 90s. We've covered Don Bluth stuff like The Secret of Nim and American Tail. We've covered both Beavis and Butthead movies. We've covered nearly everything except for thousands of other movies that we will cover in the future if you want us to do that. And that's all happening at the $10 level, only at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And you get all the $5 stuff. Henry, what is included in the $5 tier that you get with the $10 tier?
Oh, so many things, Bob. You know, if that $10 tier isn't enticing enough, it comes with over 200 exclusives that are at the $5 level, because every month on the Patreon, we cover Talking Futurama and Talk King of the Hill, a new episode of those just as in depth as we do a film like Looney Tunes Back in Action. And we've been doing those for years. We're coming up on 8 years of our Patreon. And so there's over 200 episodes of our exclusives at the $5 level too. Not just every episode of King of the Hill and Futurama that we've covered, but also we've covered the entire series of The Critic, the entire series of Mission Hill, and many of our favorite episodes of Batman, the animated series, plus tons of other interviews and other cool stuff you will find at that $5 level. That is included when you go to the $10 level to hear the movies like this movie about Looney Tunes Back in Action. And there's a whole collections page on our Patreon that you can look through to see which one of those you want to explore, just divided into the different sub-series.
And if you've never been on Patreon before, it is so easy to sign up at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And when you do, you can use any podcast app or device or program you might have to listen to all of our bonus podcasts the same way you listen to all of your regular podcasts as part of your podcasting lifestyle. Again, that is all happening at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So check out all that cool stuff on Patreon. And now let's head into a bit of our history on Joe Dante, Brendan Fraser, Bugs Bunny, and with our pal Thad Komorowski right now. I do want to start with, we usually do a profile on the director, so I did want to talk about him. The living legend of film, I would call him, director Joe Dante. Before we pick up in 1996, which is where we left off in the Space Jam podcast.
And Henry and I think just a few years ago, we were smelling the same air as Joe Dante briefly.
That's right. We went at the Castro Theater in San Francisco. Well, I think the last time or second to last time I was there, it was a double feature of Gremlins and Gremlins 2 with Joe Dante, and he was great. I really felt for him that the MC of the event started by saying, like, 76 years old, won't we love him? And I think Joe Dante was like, thanks for saying my age. Kind of
we all have Wikipedia. We were looking it up as soon as he walked on the stage.
He's in great, I mean, he's in very good shape for his age and seems to have still a very good memory of the films he worked on and generally film history. Like, he is a big film nerd, and that includes the Looney Tunes for sure.
Yeah, Joe is one of us. He buys a lot of the niche boutique label desks that I work on. One of my friends says, like, hey, look, Joe Dante bought something from me on Amazon. It's like, so it's cool. Well, Matt Groening does too. So it's it's always good to figure out, like, oh, this guy's cool. This guy's still cool.
And he grew up, born in 1946 in New Jersey, the son of a golf pro who was a nerd in the age of sci-fi and horror magazines. He loved the B-movie matinees from the likes of William Castle. He also grew up at both the peak of Looney Tunes still being played in movie theaters, as well as their introduction to being replayed on television at the time. So he had a ton of access to Looney Tunes cartoons as a nerd who would go to movie theaters all the time in between reading Famous Monsters magazine. And he also had polio growing up, which he recovered from, but that left him in bed for about a year, I think he said in one interview I saw, which gave him a lot of time to read and watch, B movies on television as well. And like a lot of directors in his generation, some of whom he'd work with, like Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis, George Lucas, and yes, John Landis, grew up loving genre films, but also saw them as like, oh, well, these kind of have like a low status and smaller budget. And eventually he'd bring bigger budget and higher status to those genre films once he got to start making movies starting in the late 70s.
Yeah, outside of a few notable exceptions, he never really strayed from horror too much. I watched one interview with him from a horror publication, and he seemed to take the stance of like, well, I love directing horror, but it's also like where the money took me to or where the offers and work was. Maybe he doesn't want to be pigeonholed in horror, but he's great at horror. He would get professionally into the industry after growing up wanting to be a cartoonist, and he went to the Philadelphia College of Art, first thinking he would be a cartoonist, and he was then told that that's not real art, and then he instead went into the film editing department instead and started working as a film editor, which got him access to a whole bunch of old footage that he would then, with at least one friend, he would splice into this project called The Movie Orgy. Yeah. Eventually it grew to 8 hours of just... It's like a YouTube poop of the 60s. It's like mashups and supercuts of like cheesy old movies that any Mystery Science Theater fan knows, or old commercials or Nixon speeches. You had to get in a car to see your poops back in the day.
Yes.
That reminds me of pre-YouTube. I would go to anime conventions, and there would always be one panel that would be just a bunch of fun clips from different things. And 5 years later, you just go on YouTube or Dailymotion or whatever and find those. But before that, you had to drive to a convention and find the one guy who had all the clips.
Yeah. And also Looney Tunes and other cartoon clips were in there too. And they were made to be watched in a pot haze, honestly. And they were sponsored by Schlitz beer at one point, even the screenings of it. Technically illegal to screen any of them now because it's full of copywritten clips. But to this day, they occasionally do get stealth screenings, including some hosted by Joe Dante superfan Quentin Tarantino. So with the success of Movie Orgy and other stuff, by 1974, Dante, done with college, heading west, and he joins New World Pictures, which is the production studio of Roger Corman. Already at that point, to movie nerds, Corman is being known as a kingmaker because he already did the early work of Coppola, Peter Bogdanovich and Martin Scorsese. So already it's like, oh, I want to join. Like Dante is part of the second collection of guys who want to follow in those footsteps.
And then actors like Jack Nicholson and I believe Clint Eastwood as well are coming out of Corman.
Yes. Jack Nicholson, there's a clip of him like crying in a documentary about how much he owes to Roger Corman. It's sweet. Also in his group are, along with Joe Dante, are James Cameron, Jonathan Demme, and John Sayles, who would work a lot with Joe Dante. And as Joe Dante calls it, like, it was a great learning experience because, quote, you did quickly come to realize that you could function under the worst possible conditions because you worked for Roger. Everything always went wrong. Technically, his first movie is a movie he co-directed in a week called Hollywood Boulevard. But his first real movie is Piranha, which he co-wrote with John Sayles. And it's great. I love it. I just watched it for the first time on a 4K release from Shout Factory. And Dante would tell the story that Steven Spielberg prevented Universal from sending a cease and desist letter over Piranha being a Jaws ripoff because Spielberg could tell it was Dante turning it into a full parody of Jaws because he was told to make a Jaws ripoff, and Joe Dante's a little stinker, so he turned it into a parody of Jaws.
It sounds like that Dante kid is a real troublemaker.
Yeah.
And it's going to ruin his career.
And then in 1981, he'd do his next movie, The Howling, which also co-written by John Sayles, and it rules. I just watched it for the first time, and one of my favorite things about Dante is he loves to comment on the media and satirize it. He has a more left wing, I'd say. He's an old hippie. A hippie who didn't, who's not as relaxed, I guess maybe is a way to describe
high-strung
it.
hippie.
And so the Howling, also written with John Sayles, and it stars Dee Wallace, who Spielberg would then cast in E.T. Spielberg is paying attention to Dante, and this is when they connect. Another undervalued thing in Dante's career is he was one of the first directors of the TV show Police Squad and helped define the Looney Tunes style comedy of the Zaz Productions by working on Police Squad.
6 amazing episodes.
They are amazing, though. They are. They really are. And you can see he was the right person to direct this, even if it didn't actually work out.
Yeah, mainly in his profile, I want to point out, all the times he made these cartoony choices, it's like, this guy obviously should be directing the Warner Brothers cartoon movie. When he works with Spielberg, he does get his first time working at Warner Brothers Studio. First, he's handed a horror spec script by Chris Columbus, and then he also is going to work on a big-budget anthology film, Twilight Zone, his first studio movie, which is also George Miller's first studio movie. There's a lot to say about that movie, but on the Dante side of things, his remake of It's a Good Life is his first time, not only working with the Warner, library of stuff, but also it is an animated live-action mashup at times, though not on the level of, even Roger Rabbit. And on top of that, he's getting to use the sound effects that were in Looney Tunes because it's a Warner production. Mm-hmm. And Nancy Cartwright is in it, and she had this story that she only got cast because he saw that she worked for Dawes Butler. And he's like, oh, I know who Dawes Butler is. You're hired immediately.
I say re-release that movie. It should just be the It's a Good Life and the John Lithgow segment.
Yes.
Plain Gremlin.
No more Dan Aykroyd.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Dante then moves from that to working on Gremlins, and it turns into, a big film for him. He ET-ifies it as demanded by the studio, I think, more than what he wanted. But it also should be noted that before and after Gremlins, he was apparently on the short list of potential directors in the pre-Spielberg production of Roger Rabbit. And when Spielberg came on, he was also one of the potential Roger Rabbit directors before Zemeckis became the director.
Check out our 7-hour podcast for more on that.
Thad, you have no thoughts on Roger Rabbit, so I won't. No, but Joe Dante would have done a good Roger Rabbit, I think.
He would have. So would Eric Goldberg, because he was up to direct that. You know that, right?
Yes, he would. But would he have done as many fawning interviews, self-serving? I don't think so, if Eric Goldberg was the director. But so Gremlins, I think it owes a little to Bob Clampett's Falling Hair, though I couldn't find literally him saying, oh, this is but it pulls from the Roald Dahl Gremlins that was going to be a cartoon and all that, right?
Yeah, and actually in the sequel, I forget if it was the home video version, but there is when they're taking over the movie or whatever, and there's all these random clips, there is a clip from Falling Hair in there. So,
Oh, well, there you go.
So yes, it was very much on Joe's mind when he did those films. Absolutely.
And Gremlins is also the first time Joe Dante worked with his favorite of the classic directors, Chuck Jones, who appears in the film. And at the Q&A, I asked, like, hey, how did Chuck Jones get in this movie? And he basically said what I've seen in other interviews. I wasted my question on an obvious thing I could have Googled now that I think about it.
That was like a Stan Lee cameo. He was what, a movie theater patron or something?
He was the mentoring cartoonist of Zach Galligan's character in it. Yeah. Joe Dante said he had become friends with Jones years earlier, meeting him at the Telluride Film Festival, and he loved working with him. I do think Chuck was his favorite of the classics directors, and I mean, Thad Jones in the 80s was in a pretty good position with Warner then, right? He was working on a lot of the remake.
I'm trying to think. Jones did a couple of things. I mean, his first things were some awful specials in the late 70s, Carnival of the Animals and Connecticut Rabbit and King Arthur's Court. And he did a couple of other little segments. Friz Freeling did a couple as well. Chuck did the compilation movie, Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie, and Friz did a bunch of them. But no, he was becoming the spokesman, the elder spokesman for Warner cartoon history. He was just a lot smarter than, say, Bob Clampett was at ingratiating himself into that role. He was being more, quote unquote, well read. Friz probably had that offer too, but that's the beautiful thing about Friz is that he just did not give a shit. It was just a job to him, and he's hedging on about almost 80 at that point. He's like, I don't no part of this, because he had just gotten screwed out of his own company by Marvel. So
Marvel screwed over a creator?
Oh, I know, right. But no, Chuck was smart. He was pretty beloved by everyone who grew up watching those cartoons, and it helps when you have like 10 or 15 years more on all the other directors directing classics, because that's the concept of percentages and ratio. It's like, well, who did the most of the best cartoons? Well, Chuck Jones did, because he directed them, like literally the biggest number of them, other than Freeling, and Freeling's not on his A game as much as Chuck is. Versus Clampett, Clampett did 5 years of really great animation, some of the best ever, but Warner Brothers didn't own it at the time, so yeah, he's not going to be the official spokesman for the stuff.
And this, after the Gremlin success, Dante moves on to work on some other films like Explorers, which got tinkered with a lot. He has a lot of studio interference from this point onward. Usually when Steven Spielberg's not there to say, leave Joe Dante alone, it seems like he gets his movies fucked with a lot.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case.
That movie also went up against Back to the Future and just got destroyed. Yeah, I'd never seen Explorers until it was on TV one Saturday afternoon when I was a kid, and I thought, like, what is this movie? It's so good. And then much later I found out, like, everybody hated it. It didn't make any money. Joe Dante made it, et cetera, et cetera. River Phoenix is in it.
Yeah. Well, and he also did Inner Space, which, like, it didn't do particularly well. And that's like a Comedy Central one I saw a million times. That and The Burbs, I feel like, were replayed on Comedy Central 8 million times in the 90s. But eventually, Warner Brothers, they really want a sequel to Gremlins. The short version is they can't figure out a way to do it without Joe Dante. They hire him back, and he asks for a lot of creative control, which they give to him. And he does Gremlins 2: The New Batch, which is a parody of Gremlins straight down to murdering Leonard Maltin on screen for his negative review of Gremlins.
I didn't really get that movie until we saw it in theaters with Joe Dante, and it finally clicked for me. So I'm happy. I'm now a Gremlins 2 fan.
Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful thing. It's just him going nuts, and it's always amazing when they're given that much creative license, and like you actually put this out. Now they won't.
No. I mean, it was like right before the door closed on that kind of thing. I mean, I also love to, another of my favorite scenes of that is when And as a pedant of movie rules, I am this too. But there's a scene of like the three people all around Zach Galligan of like, okay, so wait, it's always midnight somewhere. So what's after midnight for eating? And what if like a kernel gets stuck in his tooth? And as they're all like laughing about the rules, a gremlin attacks and starts killing a guy for questioning the rules of the movie. But another aspect of Gremlins 2 that's important is that Chuck Jones animated the opening for it, which was cut pretty short.
Yes.
The full thing was put out recently by somebody. I remember.
It was on the DVDs.
Ah, okay.
There was it was a whole segment. It was really ponderous. What year was Gremlins 2? Was it 90?
90, right? Yeah.
Okay, then that would have been the introduction of Jeff Bergman as Bugs and Daffy too, as well. So, that was the first major profile thing after Mel Blanc's death. I think it came before Tiny Toons, but yeah, that's another thing that's great about it. But it's interesting. I'm not even saying it's interesting. It's not good. It's just ponderous, and it just goes on, and they were right to cut it down.
Just for Jones's own sake.
Yes, exactly. They cut it down to the bare essentials of the WB shield getting screwed up and all of that.
Yeah, that extended opening is so tedious, and I don't know where they farmed it out to, but it just looks bad. It looks very, very bad.
I don't know. It might have been Tom Ray, who was a really nice guy, but he wasn't the greatest animator. You'll see his name in the credits of a lot of Latter-day Warners and a lot of Chuck Jones productions. I don't know. Unfortunately, I think there's some Virgil Ross animation in the first one, and he was a great animator, but he was also pushing into his 80s at that time. It's like, maybe, this is how fucked up the business is. He's still doing the same things in 1990 that he was doing in 1940 with same characters. It's like, let a man rest.
Work faster, Grandpa. This movie's got to be in theaters in July. Let's go.
Unfortunately.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.
So Dante's next film released after this is the 1993's Matinee, which is, a period film about, nuclear fears in the Cuban Missile Crisis mixed with a William Castle type of B-movie director played by John Goodman. It's pretty good, and especially when I learned how it was done on like a nothing budget and barely made at a point. But while working on it, he also was working with the same writer, Charlie Haas, on a script called Termite Terrace, which was meant to be, I saw one person describe it as the Goodfellas, but for Warner Brothers cartoons. But, well, Thad, you took a look at a 93 edition of the script of that. What did you think?
The criticism of it is that it's a lot of Chuck Jones's version of events and interpretation of the history. But I wouldn't even give it that, because I know Chuck's gossip. And other than this really anti-Semitic portrayal of Leon Schlesinger as Mort, because there's the anecdote that he was so stupid he didn't realize Daffy Duck's voice was based on him, which was a Chuck Jonesism, but turned out to be bullshit. But it's like, I don't recognize this because like the producer in it is like this complete monster screaming about, why did you do this Bugs Bunny cartoon? And it's like, it's a complete bullshit. It's like, it's not even even Chuck on his wildest fantasies never said anything like remotely like that. And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of glad this wasn't made. It didn't get off the ground, because there's enough distortion of Hollywood history, and we don't need more fodder for that.
Well, Dante wishes, it's one of his, he has many projects that didn't get completed. He said he really was into it, and he talked about how he learned a lesson about don't waste years of your life producing something on spec, because as he characterized it, Warner was like, we're interested. They even set up interviews with some of the surviving animators as part of the project, and then ultimately decided not to go with it. And so Dante ended up doing a bunch of work on something that he never got paid for in his production company. And he says that based on the date on that script, like by the middle of 93 is when Warner passed on it because they were revving up for Space Jam because the Jordan Bugs ads were already getting big at that point. So Dante definitely blames Space Jam for the death of Termite Terrace because that's his biopic.
I blame Space Jam for the death of culture.
Bob, I keep going back to something you said. I think it might have been in the old podcast. It's like, I thought we agreed this movie was bad. Why is this still going on? Why is it?
Yeah, I'm there. And I feel the same way about Hook, which I just rewatched thanks to the Blank Check podcast. I was a child when Hook came out. I thought it sucked then. I think it stinks more now because I understand all the weird stuff happening in it. So I understand people are younger than me. They can have different opinions on things. But I thought there was a consensus. I thought we all got together as a people and decided this is a bad thing and we will not praise it in public.
Space Jam was a very successful commercial, and that people like commercials.
It is. Yes, it was successful, and people will forgive success. I mean, people will forgive something's rottenness if it's successful. And, you know, flip side of the coin, Back in Action, which is a much better movie than Space Jam. It's still not very good, but, you know, it wasn't a success. Far from it. So, yeah, let's dump on it. Yeah, exactly. Even if it doesn't really deserve it.
And Joe Dante spends a lot of the 90s being involved, but not directing several big projects. He was at one time a possible director of Jurassic Park, of The Phantom, Slam Evil, The Phantom, and Casper, The Mummy, even the Flintstones. And there was I found one funny quote of him saying, like, he was offered the Flintstones and he said, like, hey, you should hire somebody who like really loves the Flintstones who actually can care about this. Cause I don't. He was like, I'm not the Flintstones guy for you. Sorry.
That could be potential future subject matter for this podcast. I only saw that movie once and I was very bored by that too.
Me I don't remember anything about it. I really don't. And I have no desire to revisit it. Maybe that's the good thing of a lot of this stuff not being on streaming.
I just know that Spielberg approached John Goodman 5 years earlier and said, "You're going to be my Fred Flintstone." And he said, "I don't want to, but I guess I can't say no to Steven Spielberg." And then he was Fred Flintstone. Just once.
So this is when Dante goes back to Spielberg and to work on I believe his only DreamWorks film, which is Small Soldiers, a Gremlins for the 90s. Basically, it's Gremlins, except they're little toys. And I just rewatched it. And the best parts of it are that, like, it's anti-corporate military. The last time you could do that in a big budget kids movie. But it was toned down thanks to it being tied in with a Burger King promotion. And it has the unfortunate issue of it being like one of the last Phil Hartman films, and it's dedicated to him too.
Yeah, that's why I didn't see it, and still to this day. I mean, it came out just 2 months after he was murdered. So it had that dark cloud over it, just thinking about we'll never see Phil Hartman again outside of this and maybe whatever else is in the can.
It was, I remember seeing it in theaters and it just bumming me out there. Though Kirsten Dunst is great. You can see why she became a star. She's the best kid actor in the movie. Though the main character is basically like they wrote a Columbine-style school shooter type kid is the main character who puts his anarchist cookbook knowledge to good use to battle the small soldiers in the town. He's like, oh, here's how you can blow up a can of gasoline type deal. And so now Dante, after Small Soldiers, he's also now trying to work in the world of like, well, CGI is here and it's replacing, physical sets. How do I work with this? So this brings us up to now post Space Jam era of Looney Tunes. And Space Jam, when you look at the numbers, a hit, but not a huge hit at the box office. 90 million domestic, 250 global. Still, that is very, very good. But it's the fact that it sold over $1 billion of merchandise that's why Warner loves it. They wanted to get quick into work on a sequel, but one of their first problems is that Michael Jordan went back to basketball and is very focused on doing a three-peat of championships with the Chicago Bulls until his retirement in 1999, which doesn't leave you much time to film a special effects intensive movie. Meanwhile, on top of that, 90s Looney Tunes projects are kind of on the wane because Spielberg started DreamWorks, so his things aren't really going anymore. Cartoon Network is like the exclusive home. They stopped being on Nickelodeon, so they're being seen less. And other than the Sylvester and Tweety mysteries, there were just 6 shorts made by Chuck Jones Film Productions from 94 to 97. And that's kind of it for the rest of the 90s for Looney Tunes productions, unless I'm forgetting anything.
And I'll get into that. Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries, that only exists because they did not know if the merger with Turner would happen in time for the WB network launch, and they would be able to do a new Scooby-Doo. That's the only reason that exists.
Wow.
And it's not a bad series. It's we take for granted a lot of middle of the road stuff. There's some funny stuff in it. It's especially considering this is a concept that shouldn't exist.
TMS produced most of it, I think, right?
Yeah, it's a really good-looking show. I barely watched it, but I assumed it was made because Tweety was such a merchandise character for the 90s. Like,
Yes.
Tweety and Taz were so merchandise.
Yes.
You could have your pissed-off Tweety on a jean jacket or your pissed-off Taz on a leather jacket. There's 2 different types of people in this world.
And that's made a lot of people, like my fiance, dislike Tweety greatly because of that's considered the girl character, and that's the one you get all the crap with that character on as a kid. Nope, that's your default. It's Tweety.
And those they were both Joe Alasky in that series, right?
Yes,
Wow,
and you played that clip earlier of Daffy from the movie. And, oh God, I miss that guy so much.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. Yeah, mysteries. And then you mentioned Chuck Jones did a bunch of shorts. And it does relate to Space Jam because Chuck was very public and said he didn't like the movie. And that's why there's only 6. They killed the deal immediately. That is absolutely true. I think that's why Billy West doesn't do any Warner characters anymore. He's been critical of Space Jam publicly as well. I don't know if that's the reason though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's just speculation, but I mean, Billy West is doing fine, I think.
Oh yeah, he is. But I think he does the best Elmer Fudd, and which, as this movie shows.
Oh, he should always be Elmer.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get to it. A big improvement on this in this movie are the voices,
Yes.
because we don't like Billy West Bugs Bunny. It's fine for like if you're doing a radio bit, I feel, but it doesn't really have the range he needs, I feel.
Billy needs to be you need to be a real hard ass with Billy on some cases, and Bugs Bunny is one of them, because I've had friends who've directed him in the booth and they said, no, he for like just random things. He's like, no, he turned out fine. But yeah, I definitely agree. Joe did do a better Bugs than him, which I was surprised because prior to Back in Action, Joe didn't do Bugs at all. So that was quite shocking to see that he was doing double duty on this. And there was another Joe Alasky celebration, is that Duck Dodgers TV show, which was came out the same year as Back in Action, where Joe never stops talking in that show. So, yes.
Yeah. I guess not to get too off topic, but Billy West, the late 90s were him just dropping in once to do these very famous characters like Bugs Bunny and Shaggy, and then never doing them again.
And then he did Woody Woodpecker and Felix the Cat in that decade as well. Yeah, it just seemed like, Billy just was like being called in to do every actor whose original voice actor was dead. It was a weird time. I've never talked to him about that. I kind of asked him, like, what was the deal there, man?
Well, production on Space Jam 2, or whatever the follow-up to Space Jam would be, had fits and starts. One of the funnier stories out there, thanks to Bob Camp, the Ren and Stimpy legend, that he was hired in 1997 as a production artist to work on a Space Jam 2 with director Joe Pytka, who was back, which is crazy because it sounded like he was fired during the production of Space Jam from some of the stories. But Pytka's there, and they were told internally, like, Michael Jordan is on. Like, an unnamed producer, this is Bob Camp's story, that an unnamed producer at Warner said, yes, Michael Jordan's on. Let's get to work. Let's figure out what the movie's going to be. And Bob Camp has some character designs out there you can see, including of a villain named Berserko that was going to be voiced by Mel Brooks, so it kind of looks like Mel Brooks.
Yeah, I've seen these on his Facebook page, and he usually posts a lot of things that, a lot of failed projects, not failures on his part, he was just hired to be an artist, but things like the incredible Mr. Limpet remake with Jim Carrey.
Right. That's terrifying looking, those drawings. That's, and And yet Camp was working on it for weeks into the project, and then it turns out that producer was lying. Michael Jordan never said yes. And I mean, that seems like the total Hollywood thing of just say he said yes to get the production started. I'm sure he will say yes eventually and just get going.
I think they just assumed he'd have gambling debts and he would need to take on the role.
He was paying off those gambling debts with his MCI commercials in 98 and 99 that were still with the Looney Tunes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
They were a sequel to the shoe commercials.
Except now they care about your long-distance services instead of if you have good enough shoes to play basketball.
Nothing was more important in the late 90s than your long-distance plan. Who are we calling?
Bob Camp got paid pretty good for a few weeks on Space Jam 2 that never happened. And it sounded like he was bouncing around a lot on Warner Productions that didn't happen. As we've mentioned on several podcasts, late 1998 and early 2000s were a bad time to work in the Warner Features Animation section.
It sure was.
Oh, and also in the Looney Tunes crossing over with live action things, I had completely forgot about Daffy Duck on the Drew Carey Show. Did you remember this, Bob?
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's I guess that was a Warner Brothers produced show then, airing on a Disney network. Okay.
It's crazy to watch and see, like, wow, they did a whole Daffy Duck applies to work at Drew Carey's company, the department store. God, I'm ashamed of myself. I can't remember the name of it, but
Dunder Mifflin.
That was the one that's the only name that was coming to my mind.
Not to reference Blank Check again, but it's the only podcast I ever heard talk about the Drew Carey Show. One of them was watching it on the show, and they realized that the show was renewed for a ton of seasons, but by season 4, they were kind of like, I don't know what to do with this sitcom. So it just goes in crazy directions, and doesn't really work. And I think a lot of the end of the Drew Carey Show, which ran until like 2003 or 2004, was just pure gimmicks, like spot the wrong things in this scene. And you can win stuff by watching.
Yeah. So Space Jam, in and out of production for years, this sequel. This is where you hear these stories online, and I was trying to find the best sourcing I could on this. So in Entertainment Weekly in 2001, in the summer of 2001, there is a story in the press of Jackie Chan is in talks to make Spy Jam. And this is a quote from Jackie Chan in the article. "My managers are negotiating. I like cartoons. It would be very, very fun." End quote. So it sounds like Jackie's really excited.
It's hilarious. They're obligated to keep the jam part of the title.
Yes. Yeah, they still, we got to keep the branding somehow. And this, from Space to Spy, it's only 3-letter difference.
I would call it Space Foo. That's just me.
I like that. It'd be in space instead of spy stuff, which, I mean, if you watch this movie, you can tell they had a lot of Spy Jam ideas left over for this movie that they just put into this one.
They had ideas that should have just been forgotten and abandoned. I mean, God, that freaking dog at the end of it. So I don't know who insisted on the robot puppy, but that was like from some abandoned draft that just got re-put in again.
Well, that Entertainment Weekly article is also where the idea of but we could also do a sequel with Jeff Gordon called Race Jam about NASCAR.
Less NASCAR in the world is better. So, yeah, I'm glad that didn't happen.
I don't like the name Race Jam.
No.
Oh, my God!
Yeah.
I just heard it.
Now, it's about a battle in space. We're going to call it Race War.
I mean, that is, Jeff Gordon does appear in the movie with NASCAR stuff, which feels like a contractual obligation of some kind that he has the cameo in the film. And also Joe Pytka, he has a story that around 2000, he took a meeting for a sequel script of Space Jam that had Tiger Woods as the human in it. So it would have been golfing. And I would think Tiger Woods has an even less magnetic on-screen chemistry than Michael Jordan does. Oh, and also another one in the story of blank jams is Skate Jam. This is from Tony Hawk, that he said in 2003, in the lead up to the release of Back in Action, he has pitched, the next one we make will be you with the Looney Tunes, and it'll be called Skate Jam. And then when Back in Action bombs, that project dies.
Henry, are you just putting stuff into AI and generating it? Because this is getting really like.
I'm telling you, Tony Hawk tweeted it. He said it happened.
Okay.
Was Christy Yamaguchi attached to Skate Jam?
Now, of all these fantasy scripts, it seems like Jackie Chan's got the farthest along, and you can find like a mock-up poster, production art, what seems to be like drafts of the race that's in this movie are of Bugs and Daffy with Jackie Chan in it. And Jackie Chan makes sense to a degree that he is like a cartoonish figure who he loves the silent comedy that also inspired the Looney Tunes too. So it makes sense.
Yeah, that's not the worst thing. But didn't he end up like doing Jackie Chan Adventures or something like that instead at the time?
Well, he also was working with Warner a lot then with Jackie Chan Adventures. Yeah, so that's probably why he's in the meeting.
Yeah, I want to say that like maybe I guess by 2003 we had just crested the Jackie Chan peak in the West, but we are currently on the downward slope of the Brendan Fraser decline.
Yes. Well, and as a Jackie Chan fan who's seen a lot of his movies up to the year 2005. He's made a lot of movies I haven't seen. Coming to America was difficult for him in that he liked to make movies where stunt people are endangered in ways that are illegal on American sets. And he was frustrated you couldn't do that on American movies. And I mean, if you want to see the closest thing to what Spy Jam would have been, it's probably The Tuxedo, which was a very similar, I accidentally become a spy, not to be confused with The Accidental Spy, a different movie he made.
Yeah, I think The Tuxedo was the end for him, right?
When America, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So at some point, Jackie Chan exit. Don't know why. I think he decided to go with DreamWorks with The Tuxedo because he wanted to work with Spielberg. When does Joe Dante come in? Well, in 2009, in a profile on Dante, he said his decision was because of the February 2002 passing of Chuck Jones. It seems like that is why he wanted to do it, as a tribute to his good friend Chuck Jones, who hated Space Jam, and Dante didn't like Space Jam either, and he wanted to make a movie that preserved Jones's legacy and a film that Chuck Jones would have enjoyed. That, like he said, I made this movie because my friend Chuck Jones passed away. He was very proprietary about the ways the Looney Tunes had been treated in other features. I basically went along because I wanted to maintain the integrity of the characters. I didn't want to see them burlesqued or turned into something that they weren't.
Yeah, that's what I have heard through the grapevine. It was because Joe's just flat out said it. He just did it because Chuck hated Space Jam, and he just wanted to do it as some final gift to him. Just like, we gotta at least make it better than that. It's gonna be fucked up somehow. We just need something better than Space Jam. That was all. That was the only goal, and I think they succeeded at least with that.
Yeah, it's obviously very reverent to Chuck Jones, and so is Space Jam in a way, but I think both those movies, they are just presenting Chuck Jones' greatest hits for the most part. It's like, you know those bits you remember? Well, here they are. Maybe there's a twist. Often there isn't.
You know, there's a phrase that I like to use. It's called corporate Jones. That's what I think of a lot of this stuff as. Like, because, like, you know, you want to go blame Chuck for everything wrong with, you know, modern incarnations of Daffy. And it's like, well, no, go look at what he did with Daffy. Those are all great. It's what all these other fucking people are doing with it.
Yeah, you're right. It's basically the mainstream version of the Looney Tunes and all the bits that largely come from Chuck Jones. Like, I don't need another version of Rabbit Season, Duck Season, Fire, which is why I respect the newest movie. A, it's because it's the first real Looney Tunes movie, but B, they're not just doing, hey, remember this bit? We're doing it again.
Yep.
The references are very slight and only for ultra pedantic weird nerds like us.
In Joe Dante's defense, too, this movie opening with more Duck Season, Rabbit Season was entirely a reshoot at the end of it. That was, I don't think he wanted. It was not the opening he had shot and wanted to do. But in June 10th, 2002 is when Variety reports on Dante being the director and the first casting is announced. They also talk about a writer. But before I mention that writer, I just want to say that I think the first writers on it, or other two writers who worked on it, were Glenn Ficarra and John Requa, who were Nickelodeon guys. They had worked on Angry Beavers and Wild Thornberrys, then moved into feature. They did Cats and Dogs, which was a huge success. I am too old to have seen that movie.
Same.
I did see it, unfortunately. It's a kid's movie. It's stupid. It's funny. It was a good thing to see when you were the right age.
And this has a lot of Cats and Dogs DNA, I'd say.
I do like how one of the characters' name is just a parody of Pussy Galore. Because I believe Cats and Dogs 2 is called, like, The Revenge of Kitty Galore or something.
Yes.
Right. Well, I did look into Fakar and Rekwa, if I mispronounced that, sorry. But they've done a lot of junk like DC's League of Super Pets, Smallfoot, the Jungle Cruise movie that The Rock made. They did I Love You, Philip Morris, which I actually did like that movie. If you want to see a movie where Ewan McGregor sucks off Jim Carrey, you will see it in I Love You, Philip Morris. So it's
Is that the one where Jim's having unprotected sex that it gets looped around? I think it is, right?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah,
But it's a
okay.
fun movie. But those guys just get story by credit. The announced writer in that article, who also is said to be producing the Looney Tunes shorts as well as overseeing the writing team and contributing as a writer on several new shorts that they're going to be worked on in the tradition of Chuck Jones and Tex Avery, is Larry Doyle.
We're all sharpening our razors on Stroops over here. Now, I don't have anything against Larry Doyle outside of the work he's done. He was a Simpsons writer for a very short time. I'm just wondering why he was given this position of prominence, because if you watch those Looney Tunes shorts they made to follow this film, the first thing you will see is often Larry Doyle presents. Like, you're going to be elbowing your wife, honey, look, Larry Doyle's presenting this. I can't wait to see what he's going to give us on this next short.
That's something the late Earl Kress, who was a writer who worked a lot with Warner's, Hanna-Barbera historian. He did a lot of Pinky and the Brain. I showed those to him way back when they finally leaked. I think they were put on the back in action disc from Europe. That's where they were, a lot of them dumped. And Earl's comment was, the most disturbing thing about these very disturbing cartoons is that produced by Larry Doyle, giant credit. It's like, does he really think he should be compared to Leon Schlesinger?
Look, honey, it's the writer of Girly Edition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He was fresh off of the movie Duplex. It also came out the same year as in 2003. So that was like his other feature film, which was not a hit at all. So Warner put a lot of trust in Larry Doyle just based on he wrote this script, which they reworked so much you would think they don't respect him. And yet they gave him all this power.
Maybe it was a case of, he wrote for Beavis and Butthead, he wrote for The Simpsons. This is what the kids like now. He can write for our characters.
Maybe he's good at meetings and impresses executives. But he's the writer of the movie. He's put in charge of a bunch of shorts that are meant to be released alongside the film. But the animator hired to be the animation director of the film, not named in the variety piece, so he must have been hired a little after, is Eric Goldberg, who is a great animator. We love him. We've talked about him a ton on the podcast, but I think he's likely most famous for Genie on Aladdin, which Robin Williams once described as a Warner Brothers cartoon in Disney drag.
And hey, weirdly enough, co-directing Pocahontas, we took a very long, hard look at that movie last summer, and I think it's better than you remember. There's some interesting things happening in there, and great direction and color design and everything in that film.
Yeah, directing Warner character animation, there's a very short list of people who should do it, and Eric Goldberg is on that list. So, yeah, I mean, it's the right choice, even if it came together for this project. So,
yeah, Goldberg is a great animator. He came up in the Richard Williams studio in
but
the
he
UK.
had a sense of humor still.
Yeah,
he liked funny stuff. I mean, if you read his Crash Course book, which is, I think that should be the Bible for all animation students, Eric Goldberg's book. He's being one of us, and it's like, watch this scene from Tex Avery's Droopy and Spike cartoon. It's really funny timing. It's like, you're never going to hear any X Williams or Disney guy do that. So, he is one of us. And I remember at the time, Jerry Beck told me he was very pleased with a lot of us, intern nerds on the forums who really like the movie. And he's like, well, I did my job then, at least for that.
Goldberg, it's impressive for all the things that's happened in his career that would be disappointing and heartbreaking to a lot of people, that it does seem like he has kept his passion and his almost childlike enthusiasm for the cartoons. He just loves them so much. I've seen recent interviews with him or his recent Goofy animation that he had done in shorts for Disney. It's still there. His love of the art form of animation is still present.
Yeah, he recently did the Donald Duck episode of Hot Ones.
Oh yeah, and there were a couple of guys who worked on the Back in Action on there too. Jamie Olaf did some animation on that Hot Ones thing.
It's great that Goldberg was free at the time and wasn't. This is in between stints at Disney. He was co-director of Pocahontas, like Bob mentioned. He was also Phil's lead animator, the Danny DeVito character on Hercules, and he would also work on one of the Jones final cartoons for Bugs, From Hair to Eternity, though he is uncredited.
Yeah, he did that while he was directing Pocahontas. It's like, Eric, aren't you supposed to be fucking directing a movie? It's like...
Michael Eisner's going to fire him retroactively now for that.
It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause, and MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.